Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm here. I'm happy to introduce Sean Doig. Sean Doig is the Senior GIS Manager with McCormick Taylor, based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Mr. Doig has nearly 20 years of GIS experience and has worked in both private and local government. Private industry and local government, sorry. He is particularly interested in creating maps and apps that are intuitive to use and that streamline data collection and management. So let's please welcome him in his talk about Everyone's a Buzz about Survey123, using Esri's form-based application to make pollinator monitoring more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you. There are many more people in this audience than I had anticipated. All right, can people hear me? And turn it up? Up. All right, I'll just use this. I feel like I should be on The Voice with this one. I also like to wander, so I'm suddenly tethered. Yes, so everyone's a buzz about Survey123. You're probably all here because of the great title, which is from my wife, not from me. So thank you for coming to my talk today. So I'm going to start by giving us a little bit of an overview about the changing landscape for protecting pollinators. Then I'm going to dive into some of the problems that the McCormick Taylor biologists were having in terms of monitoring protocols and problems, and why they came to the GIS team for help. And then the solution we developed for them, which used Survey123 and ultimately ArcGIS Pro reports. So, landscape for protecting pollinators. So why should we care about pollinators? Well, it turns out that 80% of the food that we eat depends on pollination. So essentially, no pollination, mass starvation. So we should all be concerned. Regulatory changes. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service put the monarchs as a candidate species because of declines they've had, and that's due to climate change, habitat loss, and there are a lot of other pollinator species that are also being considered for being listed. And in fact, I think it was in December of 2024, they said, yes, we think this should be listed, and they opened up a public comment period. Now, the reason a species being listed matters is that if a species is listed, that means that certain activities are considered a take and are not allowed. And so for things like, for groups like energy companies, DOTs, things like mowing a right-of-way suddenly becomes considered a take. And so they end up participating in this CCAA, this Candidate Conservation Agreement with Assurances. And so that allows them to say, okay, we will take these certain activities and you will still allow us to mow these other areas. And so one of the things they can do is they can actually plant pollinator pilot areas and see if they can actually attract pollinators to those areas. So McCormick Taylor's been involved in supporting a number of DOTs in terms of them looking at these pilot areas. So we've been involved with site identification, setting up the pilot study areas and the protocols, selecting the native seed mixes, and then actually doing the monitoring after the seed mixes have been planted. And you can see this is a Pennsylvania DOT site. So obviously we've got the mowed right-of-way prior to the planting, and then after that we've got the wildflowers, the pollinator pilot area. So the problem they were running into, they started doing monitoring in 2023, and they were going to every one of their pilot sites either monthly or bi-weekly, and you could see they were doing really intense data collection. So this is an example on the right of one of the reports that they were submitting, and this is for every time they went out. And so there they were out collecting information and paper. They had planted multiple seed mixes. They had to track, well, which of the plants, what was planted at every site, what's actually showing up, and then not only what's showing up of what we planted, but what other volunteer or non-seed mix species are showing up. And they were also tracking, are there pollinators there? And we're taking photos. And then they would come back to the office and have to take all their paper documentation and write this very intense report that undoubtedly nobody read because I think it's like 8-point font. So they came to us and they said, oh, we need this to be way less time intensive, and we need it to be able to be replicated by others, because although McCormick-Taylor was doing that initial monitoring, the goal long term was that actually it would be taken over by the DOTs themselves, or obviously they would involve other consultants. So first step is we said, well, let's replace your paper form with Survey123, and then let's customize the form to make it much easier to collect the data. All right, so as I said, they had a lot of different seed mixes. So there were 86 unique plant species combined into 13 different seed mixes, and all the seed mixes had between 15 to 50 different plant species. So we used the choices combined with the JavaScript pull function so that we could create a choice filter. And this was interesting. This was developed by one of the guys on my team. So here's the basic concept, right? Which is that you would open up, you would start a new survey. You would go, hopefully you're already standing at the site, but you would pick a specific site that you were at, and then it would use the pull data function to pull in, and you can see it, here I am. This is where being tethered really is a bummer. You can see, here's the selected plot, here's the information about when was it planted, and then down here is really the sort of meat of the whole thing, which is like, oh, and here's the plant species, or here's the seed mix that we planted at that location. So in terms of the seed mixes, probably a lot of you have used those domains, right? Where you just say like, okay, great, here's my list name, which is, oops, sorry. I'm getting there. I got to figure this thing out. Hang on. Apologies. All right. Let's try it. Let me not use the pointer. So you create the list. You create the name of the list. You create the name for the item in the list, and then the label that you want to show up. So what he also, and I had never used this before, so he was able to add a third column, this seed mix value, and then use that choice filter. So he's using essentially almost two lists in his choice filter. So anyway, we were then able to say, so you say, okay, I'm standing at CAB 3A, and one of the attributes in there is, oh, what's that seed mix? And then it's able to go through and say, oh, okay, here's the seed mix you actually want to have, and here are all the species that are in that seed mix. So I've got a really quick video that shows this in action. All right, so you start, you haven't selected your plot. The plots show up on the map, hopefully, at some point. You select that. That's where that first pull function is going to happen once I got it zoomed into the right spot. You select that, and then you're going to see, okay, it is now pulled in that CAB plot number 1. Again, that last seeded date, the dates since it was seeded, which is obviously calculating. You'll see that I'm collapsing, which is another, obviously, some of the functionality that's really nice. And then it's pulled in this seed mix, and then what you can see is out of the species, those 86 species that were possible, it displays only the species that actually were part of that seed mix. And then I don't have this in the video, but what you then go through and do is click on each one of those that you've actually seen in the plot, And then it's going to ask you additional information about that seed mix. Is it currently in bloom? What percent of coverage do you have in the plot? So you're really able to sort of dig in a way that is filtering and narrowing it down for you that's really helpful. So in terms of appearances, you'll notice he managed to get the columns that come in, which is, again, one of the things you see that by default when you use Survey123, everything's in one column. And that's great if you're on your phone and you have a really small screen, but as soon as you have a bigger screen, as soon as you're looking at a tablet, it's really inefficient to have it all in one column. So you can use that W pound to create columns inside of the appearance attribute. And I'm sure you've all done the different ways you can actually display the multiple choice options, the minimal, compact, and other values. And then the grouping, and you saw that I had done the grouping. I collapsed one of the groups. Again, it makes it much easier for you to make it a usable form if you're collapsing your groups. And then the groups they can be triggered to open for a specific reason if you've entered a certain value. And I was mentioning that one of the things that you had to do, or one of the field factors they had to collect, was what percent coverage was it in the plot. And he used the range type. So my initial thought when they came and said to me, hey, can we, this is what we need to collect. And I was like, oh, well, is it okay if I just give you ranges? And so I was thinking it would be a single select, and I would give them ranges from, 1 to 10, 11 to 20. Will that work for you? And they were like, yeah, that's good enough. That'll work. But I really liked that he used the range type. It really gave them the ability to be more selective about what they wanted to use, and it's just much easier and more intuitive. So that was another part that I thought he did a really nice job on. So lessons learned from this part of it, you all know this. It's a really mature, flexible application. Of course, you have to build it in Connect. If you build any of this just in Survey123 up on the web, most of the functionality I talked about you don't have. You have to lock the rotation. We had to learn this twice over. So people often will fill it out in portrait form because they can see a lot more of the questions, right? But they want to take the pictures in landscape form. So we had people out in the field, and they would take a photo in landscape form. They would say, yeah, I want to keep this photo. And then they would rotate the whole app back into portrait form, and it would crash. And it just kept happening over and over again. We did another, not this particular project, but a different project, where they had to collect like 40 photos. So it was driving them insane. And we finally realized there's a bug, and you need to lock the rotation. So you can take the photos in landscape still, but this will never rotate out of portrait if you want to have it in portrait. Keep the back-end schema simple. People start thinking, oh, I can do this relationship and this relationship. You don't want to do that, especially when you get to the let's get the data out of there. So keep the back-end schema simple. And don't forget to ask about QC. We did not ask that question early on, and so they were kind of they were sort of hacking around with a map we had given them, as opposed to us saying, hey, no, you know what? We can help you, and we can build a dashboard for you and make this much easier for you to get at the data that you actually need. So that was definitely one of those lessons learned. So, all right, so great. Now it was easy for them to collect data. It went much faster, but they still need the data out of there. So again, eliminating manual work. We needed it to be much more consumable than the report they had been sending in, and we needed it to be something that other people were going to be able to replicate. So we looked at Survey123 reports, we looked at mail merge, and we looked at Pro. And we did not, and that's why I asked those questions about Power Automate. We did not think about Power Automate. So that's I've already sent a message to one of my folks about that. Survey123 reports, we just rejected it because it costs credits, and not everybody has access to credits. Thanks. So that was out. In terms of mail merge, because we have related tables, because we had photos, we just decided it's not going to work. It was going to take all this sort of back-end processing that we had to do that we just didn't think made sense, even though most companies have access to, Microsoft products. So I just covered that because I forgot this slide existed. And so we landed with Pro Reports. So we were able to connect seamlessly to the database that people were collecting. There's a wizard that walks you through it. It is a pretty new application though, and there's some bugginess to it. We had to sort of keep rebuilding the form as opposed to being like, oh, let's just edit it. It'll be totally fine, no problem. So very quickly, you just select your data source, set the fields you want to include. Again, when you select the wrong fields or you realize you need to select other fields, you're probably going to have to rebuild it. Not great. Set any filters, sort the data, and set the layout. Pretty basic stuff. So this is what we ended up with. Obviously, it's much cleaner, much more readable. I mean, on some level, they sacrificed a certain amount of density of data for the readability, but overall, the client seemed really happy with it. We were able to include the photos. The photo piece is weird because it's a grid, and if you don't have 4 photos, it's going to still leave space for 4 photos. And if you have 6 photos, well, it's going to show you 4 photos. So that part not fantastic, right? There's no page break option. So it would just kind of break when it got to whatever space, and you couldn't force it necessarily to break when it went to the next plot. So again, not fantastic. And we were doing this work early, like first half of 2024, and it wasn't until we got into like July or August that we had a preview button available with one of the updates to Pro. So there was a lot of looking at PDFs and being like, oh, this doesn't look good. Let's rebuild it and do it again. So, but it's definitely coming along. Having said all that, I feel like, gosh, maybe we're going to look at Power Automate instead. There is one thing else that they have, which is the ability to create a print geoprocessing service that incorporates the report template into it. So it will print, let's say, a map and then that report. So that combination is really appealing and I think has a lot of potential. And so we'll see if we can get that to work. I just wanted to give a quick plug for quick capture. It obviously doesn't work for the density of data we were collecting at most of the plots, but there's some other work we're doing for Maryland SHA, just trying to identify those plot locations. And in that case, I think the quick capture, which we spun up and started using in the fall, actually worked really nicely. Much more lightweight and very like user friendly, like, oh, I push this big red button, got it, that's awesome. So anyway, I think that's all I have. Yep, that is it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we have about 6 minutes for questions. I have a question.
Yes.
What would you say were benefits of using Survey123 versus Field Maps?
Oh, yeah. So Field Maps is great if you're not collecting a ton of data. You just have, like, oh, I'm at this manhole, and here's the depth of it, that type of stuff. But because they wanted to know so much information, and so we were building all these related tables for them, and it needed to have more flexibility, it was much easier for them to use Survey. It was easier on the back end in terms of the database schema, and it was easier for the end user because we could customize the way it looks a lot more. Yes?
For the ArcGIS Pro reports part of the workflow,
Mm-hmm.
so after someone's filled out the form and the field the survey wants to do, will they like go back into Office, like log into ArcGIS Pro, pull the Survey123 layer from the ArcGIS Online, and then run it through the report tool? Is that the workflow they would do?
So the way we worked it out was we had one of my team doing the back end, like they would, because they wanted the reports once a month, and so some sites they were visiting twice a month, and some just once a month. So at the end of the month, we would just run the reports for them.
Okay.
I think if we can get it to work, a better workflow would be to embed that print geoprocessing service into an experience builder, and then what you would do is they could literally close the loop on that, right? Because
Yeah.
they could say, here are the plots that I want to run this report, run the report.
And then
Right.
at the end of the survey, like even embed a link to the experience builder, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect they would be in the office
Yeah.
because of the
Oh, that makes
functionality, right? And so they would just know to go to it, and then you could put a list of the plot locations at the top, and then they could just zoom to them and select, well, here's the date range I want to look at, and then we run the reports on that.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
I'm not super familiar with Connect. I'm just curious what some of the specific features that weren't available in regular Survey 123 that you found available on Connect.
Yeah, because the Connect has the Excel form to it, it allows you to do a lot more customization. You can do simple things like only show me like question number 10 if the answer to question number 8 is X. Or you could say, oh, I want to have a red, so we did one that was about, slopes, and it was like, oh, this slope is out of range, then I want you to have this red text that says this slope is out of range. So there's just a lot more ability to customize what you want to do. And actually the Esri help information and blogs around that is actually really good. So if you're kind of thinking, well, I'd like to learn a little bit more about it, you can just read some of the Esri blogs. They're really helpful. And feel free to reach out to me, and I'll point you to the ones that I have bookmarked on my. Yeah.
In the survey form, can you embed images? Because like when you were talking about
Yes.
like the distribution range of like 0 to 100, like I didn't know if they would be training people ahead of time, like what does 50% distribution like look like so that across the board you keep like data integrity?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question, and so it's two different questions, right? So the question of everybody's collecting data in the same way, I would say that's handled on the biologist side around the training. The question you had about like, can you embed photos and stuff? So yeah, we did that for a curb ramp project we did in New Jersey, and so you can add photos. Like if it's like, oh, if you want to see what curb ramp type AB looks like, click on this button and it allows you to see the photo. And we in fact talked about that for this project because it's like, well, do you know what a black-eyed Susan looks like? And maybe if you're out there collecting field data, you should not have to ask that question. But we did talk to them about like, do you want us to add those in for the 86 species? Thankfully, the answer was no. But yeah, you can totally do that. Yeah, then it's super helpful in talking about that as well.
We have about 1 more minute